Glen, Kealey, ATEN. As it stands now, there are two key words that you should put in your memory. One is the religion of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, called ATEN. In using the code ATEN, by moving the A and by considering that M and M are the same letter, meant team. ATEN meant team. It's important to know as well that the first three letters are used to describe a beverage for 4 o'clock in the afternoon by a bunch of people in connections to England called tea time. Those 4 letters appear in the symbols of typefaces upside down. TEA are all pictured upside down in the symbols. Why don't they do the rest of the 26 becomes the question. What's not there is more important than what is, but what is those 3 letters, T. I suggest that the last letter becomes an M, and therefore the religion is building a team. And I would suggest to you is how you build a team is by controlling the genetic pool. You manufacture the people on your team if what you need is a space program, and what you are in is the 2nd century AD, saying to yourself, okay, I have 1800 years to go, and I want to get a space program by that time. What do I need? And how would you code the word ATEN, which basically becomes the word team? How you do it is you gather up all the information on genetic engineering held by the priests of Egypt, and you say, let my people go, knowing that they will follow the people that leave and check up on them. They follow Moses into the desert for 40 years and keep track of everything he does, while silently his wife sneaks off, establishes herself in what was before called Canaan, Israel, and begins the process of raising genetically engineered children, 40 years that will provide the team. They would call them about what they were making for today women, or the best of women. The language we use now for the best of women is ATEN. So that means that over the last 2,000 years they have managed to make a gene pool of women, ATENs, basically team, and place them into the gene pool, which is North Africa and Europe. Morocco being a good example of North Africa, and then merge them into the populations of Spain, Portugal, France, Holland, Belgium, and eventually into Scandinavia and Russia. Their headquarters being Franklin, Germany. The penultimate group, which is the most important, became the Gaulists, Franks. That country is called France. There you have a convent making a gene pool in Europe, sending the best and brightest ones so they attract each other. Think of the damage a company with the name Rod has, who has the authority to set up such a network, has, is, and will kill millions and millions of people in their time. There you have a convent making the gene pool in Europe, sending the best and brightest ones to North America. Needed down the line would be a merger into the people they had as originals, the African. So therefore they invent the story of slavery, send people to North America to be slaves for 150 years, begin to merge them into the population. Their genes added to the genes of the Caucasian group they sent from Europe and added to by the Grey Nuns when they got there, and the Blue Nuns, the Carmelites of Germany, who moved to Jerusalem to control the holy sites. All of it working together gave them a team of people called ATEN. The other thing they gave them was a means by which to destroy this team in the end so that the gene pool could not be traced back to Jerusalem. Since many of the people that they sent over to watch this Caucasian team were in fact Roma, otherwise known as Indians, again the gene pool could be traced back to its original site of India, and need arise to get rid of as many of them as possible. So by keeping them poor, like they had done to Africans, they were able to manage them on reserves and reservations. A population of women with that gene pool in them would have to at one time be decimated, so they not be around when people find out that they were in fact a gene made for the task. Today there was an announcement by the RCMP that the murdered and missing woman from what they call the Aboriginal community is listed as something like 1,180 women were murdered or have disappeared or suspected to have been murdered. They basically come from a population of native people that makes up 4% of the Canadian population, 16% of the Aboriginal population. So they are being killed at a rate of 4 times that of Caucasians, even though the number of Caucasians would be greater. It's simply because they have a bigger percentage. Somebody's out there doing a triage, a cull of native women because of their DNA. They're doing this culling in Syria and Nigeria. They just did it by sinking a ship in Korea, and right now there's a whole bunch of men being killed on Turkey, which would be a center of gene pool activity. It's the country just above Syria. Now, if you read the Bible and you get down to Aaron's rod, when Moses asked, "Let my people go," he turned to his brother and told him to throw his rod on the ground. Once the rod was thrown on the ground, it changed into a serpent. A serpent is the coded concept of something that wiggles, and wiggles on the floor. And the equivalent of the serpent that wiggles and wiggles is electricity. When they went to take Joshua to Jericho, they told him to walk around the city 7 times in 7 days. But on the 7th day, to walk 7 times on the day was the wall. On that day was the walls would come crumbling down. What they were doing was saying there's a code out there, and that code is the destruction of something we want to collapse is in our hands. Therefore, we have to give that capability a number, and we'll call it a number 7 to alter it, or alter, ALTER / ALTAR. Because if you put 2 7s back to back in the Desdemona typeface, you're making an alter, ALTAR. So you're changing what is by causing it to collapse. How can you do that with the concept of a rod? A-Rod, by the way, has collapsed this baseball season. He's been suspended from the New York Yankees. There was a horse in the Kentucky Derby called General A-Rod, and he came in close to the last position in the race, someplace in the middle going towards the rear. A rod comes from the name of the general who wanted to kill all the boys of Israel, called Herod. A-Rod has to be linked to something that involves electricity and causes collapse. When houses were built and electricity was placed in the house originally, there was a problem that came up at a later date that caused them to have to add a wire into the connection of positive and negative. That wire is called a ground. The ground comes out of the electrical panel and travels down the earth underneath the house and is attached to a lightning rod. The lightning rod is supposed to allow any surplus charge flowing into the house to make its way back into the ground without affecting any of the appliances or tools within the building. However, if at the end of a rod in the ground you attach a magnet, you then are creating what is known as electromagnet, which is turned on by a surcharge of electricity that comes from the rod. A rod should be approximately 5 foot long. A magnet attached to it at the bottom and the wire from the house attached at the top create a Faraday, which is the middle name of it. A rod, if you consider one of the A's, alpha to omega, can be an O. An electromagnet searches for things it can affect invisibly through a process called magnetism. It cannot function properly unless it's surrounded by water. So at the base of a house, on the pretext that it is needed to move water away from the foundation, one has created the perfect setup for a magnetic field. In this case, an electromagnetic field. You read in physics about fields about how the electricity charges the magnet, and the magnet charges the electricity. Contain it in water underneath a very thick wall of rebarred concrete, you'll build this field's power. As it seeks out, it will seep into a basement window or out of the floor. Anything living in the basement will be affected by the magnetic field, since iron is part and parcel of the construction of a human being. Most of it arrives in water. That's why taps cause sinks or toilets to turn yellow in places where the water is not filtered in the same manner as they are in major cities. So you have a human being who builds a man cave in a basement, goes there as often as possible, and since in a cold country it means probably 8 months out of the year, what you have is a tugging on the male every time he goes in the basement without knowing what is happening. Internally, his parts are being pulled at, which would cause breakages in the movements of parts of the body down further and closer to the floor. The obvious part would be that the scrotum would become elongated, and parts of the body which should be higher in the stomach end up in the scrotum, which has an effect on sex drive by making it impossible for the normal activity in the scrotum to take place. Thus the need for a special pill that can at one time provide an erection for 4 hours or less, but can at the same time make you blind. And a lot of people who don't have a scrotum called women, the net effect would be to drag the human body down further and further closer to the floor, and that of course would have an effect on breasts hanging down more. Also, in male and female, there's a malady called depression. Depression means dragging down, and people say, I couldn't get out of bed today, I didn't feel like it. I could just slide off the bed. So to make a long story short, a company with the name Rod in it can install a rod next to the building that is being erected, run a wire through that to the electricity, thus pre-plan the death of the occupants. Another thing that can happen when you mix electric circuits with water and a magnet is an explosion and a fire. Think of 911. Think of airplanes burning with their flames going up. What is coming down the building is water. Think of it gathering up in the basement and creating the necessary parts of an electromagnet. Think of an explosion and watch how it vaporizes the base so that the building, like the walls of Jericho, comes crumbling down. It can be done in a bungalow. It can be done in a duplex. It can be done in an apartment building. It can be done in an office building. Each floor itself can create a magnet which affects the movement of cells within the body. Everything linked to the nervous system is electrical. A magnet pulls on electricity and electricity pulls on magnets, depending on which end is together. Either if you put the two similar ends together, they reject each other, or put negative and positive and they attract each other. Think of the damage a company with the name Rod in it, who has the authority to set up such a network, has, is, and will kill millions and millions of people before their time. That company's name is Hydro. Now let me tell you what happened a few million years ago. An accumulation of iron from more than likely a volcano from below and a meteor from above was assembled in place, which happens to be on the boundary of Canada and the United States. Later became known as the Great Lakes. The largest accumulation of iron in the world. It sits today under an American state called Michigan. Michigan being two peninsulas. Both could be destroyed by an explosion coming from below, known to most people as a blind thrust, a vertical earthquake caused by an explosion. Should it happen to the southern peninsula of the state of Michigan, it would mean the state would be destroyed by the explosion. However, should it happen under the northern peninsula of the state called Michigan, added to the destruction of the peninsula is the breaking of the barrier that holds back Lake Superior. So there you go. Out of all that stuff in the Bible coded to mean something other than what the words say, the code suggests that they built societies and placed their gene pools under national designations around the world. In each brought in the gene pools necessary to accomplish a task designated to that location. They made certain one that provided the most important task, getting off the planet out into the universe via the Oort cloud. The population, once its shelf life had expired, could be wiped out by simply pressing a button that would ignite the electromagnetic field. In a time of the year when large volumes of water were running in that direction. Number 7 altar, destroy women. They did that and marked that day. They did that the last ones by saying that Pluto was no longer a planet and therefore women no longer existed. Then they move on to say, now that we've got a team of women in place, let's handle them and get rid of them at the same time as women. At the time between 2011 and 2062. Now that they've done the work that needed to be done, making sure that the last 50 years is the last of this female genetic pool, finally saying that now that neither one of them is needed, women or wemen, because it's not technologically precise enough for the journey into space, we'll need a little break to think about what to do next to the gene pool. Let's get rid of the male. Frosty the Snowman represents the male and heat represents the meltdown. The prevention of the birth of males has to be the means of destruction. From 7 comes 11. So it means that the numbers which represent the tasks to be done from the original 0 to the 1, which is the cosmetic leader. Number 2 is the one who actually does the job. 3 is the financier and the creator of genetic engineering, pair of boobs on a 3, the nuns. 4 is the church and the secret societies that do the background work. 5 is the Navy that gathers up all of the information in Maryland and stores it there for the future. 6 is Future Woman, the genetically engineered upside down copy of a 9 called Equilibrium, which will rule in the future. Therefore, 7's job is simply to make changes occur when they're needed. Right now, we're basically facing the destruction of human beings by murder, mass murder, gene pool elimination on the whole. Genetics becomes suicidal and death comes in the murder of gene pools, genocide, suicide. The company that sets up the network is assisted in distributing the magnetism throughout the house by a company called Bell. Because the telephone lines are carrying an electrical circuit as well, so when the power goes off at hydro, your phone that's plugged into the wall, not the ones that are basically on radio wave, so you can call hydro or Bell and tell them B&H, Bell and hydro. Now they need the property, so what they do is erratic building structures with a bunch of greasy pigs put on the telephone lines to answer people's questions by not answering anything. Apparently, according to the Ombudsman of the Government of Ontario, there are 3 going on 4,000 homes in eastern Ontario who have filed complaints with the government that hydro is in fact doing erratic billing, raising prices of hydro, double, triple, quadruple, whatever is needed, all of which means that those people who can't afford to pay will then put on a lien situation against their mortgage, and at the proper time, hydro company can apply to the courts to take possession of the property. Since they, of course, will need them to house the million or so immigrants that will run to Canada after Michigan kills 1 to 150 million people in their neighborhoods. I filed the court documents for the Pineal Court to be prepared, and everyone who has employment in hydro, Bell Canada, and the police department and the insurance industry as the main conspirators, and then a whole series of people classified as unindicted co-conspirators. In other words, when the time comes, they've dealt with the bigger groups. These are the people who made it possible for hydro, Bell, the insurance industry, and the police who work together, cause the deaths of individuals, short term and long term. They can create Alzheimer's from depression, all kinds of senility, to mass murders of 30, 40, 300 people like you have with the airplane 777 and the ferry from Korea and mines in Turkey and all of that. But eventually the mass genocide of people all are their responsibility. In those 4 groups, anyone who has control over the telephone or the mail or the internet and has been culling telephone calls or mail or files or whatever, they too will be included with the management at the trial. The problem that exists on the planet is that people who one should be able to go file these charges are all criminals. Therefore, the solution has to be bigger, better, highest power rather than the higher power. These criminals know that if left to the system, their DNA would be used to make more descendants, another generation. That's why creation has such a problem making the decision that if you allow the mass murder by those people I've just described as the people who are doing it, you're going to kill what the media would call innocents. But creation knows that they're not innocent. They are prefabricated criminals who, based upon the existing criminals, are waiting to take their place. And you would only continue the same problem with every generation that comes after. So creation's final decision is it better to stop them from doing what they're doing so that they continue to kill millions of people on the planet, or is it better to let them do what they're wanting to do, which is the Lou at the Sioux and things like that all over the world, which will at the same time take out a number of innocents? The decision comes to, are they innocent or just too young yet to be either stupid, dumbed down, and do all the things they're told to do as receptionists in the government, for example, who misdirect the information so that the real decision makers to know what is really happening? Do you allow them to be included in their leadership's genocide? At least leaving on the planet only those people who have done the least damage. No more hypocrites. A woman that sits in Ogdensburg and tells a client of social services that she knows that cheapest rent in town is $400, but she'll only give her $300 is as bad a criminal as a leader who makes decisions for the population they know are self-serving rather than population-serving. So you don't just look for the money or the big boys, you look for the stupid and hypocrites. The word hypocrite comes from hippo, and hippo is the most hypocritical animal on the planet. It looks like it's just wallowing in the water. Yet it can outrun any human being. It can come out of the water and chase them down. Even if it just sat on them, it would be the end, which they don't do. Creation's final decision is it better to stop them from doing what they're doing so that they continue killing millions on the planet, or let them do what they're wanting to do, which is the Lou at the Sioux and things like that all over the world, which will at the same time take out a number of innocent? The decision comes to, are they innocent or just stupid, dumb down, and do all the things they're told to do as receptionists in the government, for example, who misdirect the information. The real decision makers need to know what is really happening. Do you allow them to be included in their leadership's genocide? Leaving on the planet only those people who have done the least damage. No more hypocrites.